Hey parents, it's Ms. Homeyer. I just wanted to inform you guys that we have a CCA tomorrow, which is a Campus Common Assessment. So it's a major grade. And because we're having a major grade in reading tomorrow, I went over your students' progress with the questions from our last CCA. So I told them that I would read the passage on this video and go over each answer choice so they can work alongside me in the video and see what they missed. So I'm going to read the passage out loud. They know what they missed, and we talked about it, and it was interesting to see that sometimes they miss similar questions. So I know that that's a skill that they need. For instance, let me show you this. This is a student's, it was their data dig where they looked at each question, and it tells you which standard they either did well on or missed. So for instance, this student, all three of the questions that have to do with describing the interactions of characters, those questions are like, why did the character whisper? What does that action support? What is it telling you? Why did the author include that for the character? This student mastered that. However, I can work with this student on summarizing because that's where she got the red in. So this was a cool thing for your children to see, like what standards they really need help on and which ones they're masters at. And it was pretty awesome today. So I'm going to go ahead and read the passage and go over the questions and the answers. I'm going to minimize my screen so all you're going to see is my computer, and we're going to read along, okay? Alrighty, so it's called My What Is Showing. See ya, grinned my brother Joey as we hopped off the school bus. Oh, by the way, Jen, your epidermis is showing. My what? I asked. Your epidermis, Joey leaned closer and whispered. Everyone can see it. Oh, I ran up the school steps, down the hall, and into the girls' room. My best friend Megan came running after me. Jen, what's wrong? Megan asked. Is my epidermis showing? I asked. I don't know, Megan replied. What's an epidermis? I don't know, but I must look weird if it's showing, I said. Do you see anything wrong? No, you look okay, answered Megan. Maybe Joey was teasing you. Maybe, I replied as the bell rang. Come on, we'll be late. As we were walking down the hall, we saw Mrs. Warden, our science teacher. Ask her, whispered Megan. I can't, I replied. She'll think I'm silly. Go ahead, she's really nice, urged Megan. Okay, I'll do it, I said as we headed toward her. Mrs. Warden, can I ask you something? I hesitated, but then just blurted out my question. Is my epidermis showing? Of course it is, chuckled Mrs. Warden. Thanks, I said as we hurried off. Now what am I going to do? I don't know. Let's go to the library at lunch and look it up, suggested Megan. Okay, I groaned. We walked to class. No one laughed at me right away. Then Emily and Anne looked at me and started to giggle. I just knew it was because my epidermis was showing. I was so embarrassed. Finally, it was lunchtime. When we ran to the library, headed straight to the big dictionary and opened it to the E's. Okay, how do you spell it? Megan asked. Well, it sounded like Joey said, ep-I-der-mus. We started looking through the EPIs. We found epiblast, epic, and finally we found epidermis. What does it say? What does it mean? Asked Megan. You're not going to believe this, I laughed. It says epidermis is the outer skin. Joey was telling me that my skin was showing. And you thought it was something bad, chuckled Megan. What are you going to do? I've got an idea. I went back to the dictionary and began looking through it. Megan, look at this, I said. It's perfect, giggled Megan. Yeah, I can play the vocabulary game too, I said with a smile on my face. Just wait until tonight at dinner. When I got home from school, I went to my room and stayed there until Mom called us to dinner. Be right there, I shouted. It was time to put my plan into action. I waited until everyone was seated and then walked into the dining room. Jennifer, what are you doing? Asked Dad. What's going on? Laughed Mom. Joey just stared at me. I had on shoes, socks, pants, a turtleneck, a ski mask, goggles, and gloves. I even wrapped a scarf around my nose and mouth. Not 1 inch of my skin was showing anywhere. I looked straight at Joey and said, not only is your epidermis showing, but so is your proboscis. My what? Asked Joey. And that was the end of the story. And if you notice, it has a little 1 next to the word proboscis right here. And if I go down here, it has the 1, and it says proboscis is another word for nose. I talked to your students about that as well before we began the test. Number 1, Jen's actions at school suggest that so this is an inference question. You have to think about what her actions are telling you. We talked a lot about character thoughts, character actions, character's dialogue to kind of get a sense of how the character is and what they're like. So Jen's actions at school. So if I went back to the passage, I would notice that she keeps worrying, right? She's walking around thinking her epidermis is showing and she's feeling anxious. And through her actions, I can see that. So the answer was cares about what people think of her, which is B. The reason it wasn't A is because she wasn't shy. She was nervous. There was a difference there. And also, it didn't talk about people she didn't know well. It talked about people she did know, like the teacher and her friend. So that's why it was an A. It wasn't C because she does not like searching for information. She did like searching for information because she looked it up in the dictionary. D says, has only a few friends in her class. As though that might be true, it does not. Her actions do not support that because we don't know how many friends she has in class. We know that she interacted with one friend, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she only has a few. She could have a whole bunch, but maybe that's the student that she talked to that day. So all of her actions about her being nervous, wondering is her epidermis showing, asking the teacher if her epidermis is showing, looking it up because she was so nervous, that supports B, that she cares about what people think of her. This question actually, even though it was an inference question, was the highest correct response out of all the questions on the test. So I was really proud of the kids for that. The next one says, the reader can tell that my what is showing is realistic fiction because. So we broke this down, and I told the kids that realistic fiction means it's fake, which is fiction, but realistic, we see the word real in there, so it's fake but seems real. So the only answer is that it could tell about events that could happen in life today. Once we went through that, the kids instantly saw it. That was just something I hadn't specifically taught because I know they do in 3rd grade about different genres, but it was H. 3 says, Jen's main conflict is resolved when. So we talked about main conflict. She might have other problems, but the main conflict was that she was nervous, that she thought her epidermis was showing. So she resolved it the moment she realized that it was her skin. A lot of students picked she covered herself entirely with clothing. And that is the resolution part. That is at the end, and they know that, and they make the connection with the resolution being at the end. But the moment that her conflict was solved was the moment she laughed and said, oh, my brother said my skin was showing. Because her main problem was she was nervous about it. So the answer was B. She learns what her epidermis is. In paragraph 14, what does the word hesitated mean? So if I was taking this test, I would go back to paragraph 14 and I would read the sentence that this word is in. I would also read the sentence before it and the sentence afterwards. And so let's go back up to where it says paragraph 14. Okay, I'll do it, I said as we headed toward her. Miss Wharton, can I ask you something? I hesitated, but then just blurted out my question. Is my epidermis showing? So she hesitated, but then she blurted out. So it's got to be the opposite of blurting because they used the word but. But then I did this. So it's the opposite. So it's got to be paused. I didn't shiver. I didn't imagine, but then blurt out. And I didn't shout, but then shouted. That wouldn't make sense. It has to be the opposite of that because it uses the word but. Also, if I put this back in context with the passage, I would say, I paused, but then blurted out. That makes more sense than I shivered, I imagined, or I shouted. Number 5, who is the narrator of the story? So this is a really interesting question. A lot of kids miss this, and this question actually won't even count for their grade because I didn't specifically go over who's the narrator of the story. Students have a hard time with this because they're just learning point of view and they're just learning how to look at different people's perceptions. So that's a developmental thing that students in 4th grade are just now learning. And so talking about the narrator, they have to be able to see who is telling the story. So the narrator is also the speaker or the person who's telling the story. That's a challenging word. So narrator is speaker or the person telling the story. So I tell them, look in the passage for the word I. If you see I, you're going to know who's telling the story. There's only one rule. The I can't be in dialogue. If it's in dialogue when people are talking, then don't include that. Look for I when it's just in a regular sentence. So if I go back up and I look for I, Joey just stared at me. I had on shoes, socks. So I know it's not Joey because Joey wouldn't have said Joey just stared at me. He would have said I just stared. So I know it's not Joey, so it's got to be somebody else. Let's go back up a little bit. I know it's not Mom because it says, what's going on? Laughed Mom. If Mom was the person telling the story, she would say, what's going on? I laughed. Now, Megan, her friend, we know it's not her because she giggled right here. It's perfect, giggled Megan. She would have said, it's perfect, I giggled, so it's not Megan. But right here it says I again. I've got an idea. I went back to the dictionary and began looking through it. So I know it's somebody that's with Megan. And then if I go up all the way to the top, there are some clues. So it says, Jen, what's wrong? Megan asked. So Megan and Jen are talking. Is my epidermis showing? I asked. I asked. So the I is Jen. Jen is the person that's talking. So as long as I is not in the quotations, look for that. Okay, so the answer was A, Jen. 6, in paragraph 3, what is the most likely reason Joey whispers? So he gets off the school bus in the beginning, and they both walk into school, and he says, hey, your epidermis is showing. Everybody can see it. So the reason that he did that was because he really wanted her to be like, what? It's showing? Oh my goodness. And he wanted her to kind of freak out about that. So he doesn't whisper to make Jen understand him. It's not F. He does not want others to notice Jen's epidermis. He wants her to worry about what they're thinking, right? So it can't be that. He does not want the bus driver to hear what he says. It never mentioned the bus driver. He wants Jen to think epidermis means something shocking. That's why he whispers, is because he really wants to play up that this epidermis is so terrible so that she'll feel really nervous. By the end of the story, what can the reader conclude about Joey and Jen's relationship? And that answer, a lot of students got this right. They enjoy playing jokes on each other. So he played a joke on her about the epidermis, and then she came back at dinner time and played the joke that your proboscis is showing. The summary one I'm going to come back to. And then number 9 says, Jen covers herself up before coming into the dining room, most likely because she wants to. So why did Jen cover herself up? So she was nervous about the epidermis. She figured out what epidermis meant, and at the end she covered up her epidermis. So she wants Joey to know, I know what epidermis is. You can't trick me anymore. I've solved it. So it's not to stop thinking about whether her skin is showing, because she already knows that it's just skin, that the epidermis doesn't make her nervous anymore. It's not to find out whether Joey knows the meaning of epidermis, because he obviously already knows because he told her. It's not to help Joey understand how his comment made her feel. A lot of students pick that. But if I was an author and I wrote how she felt at school, she would be crying to Joey. If it said, why did she cry to Joey, that would be the answer, because that's how it made her feel. So she covered herself up, not to tell him I felt nervous. She covered herself up to show him that she knows what it means and he can't trick her anymore. The summary question, we have a strategy at school that works really well, and that's that the students need to make sure that the ending is always included. If the ending's included, it usually knocks out 2 answers, and then they read it all. So parents, please go over this with your students today, and we have a CCA in the morning. Alrighty, bye-bye.